to be late. So go get a drink and hurry right back. We'll be starting in just a few seconds. All right, if you're just joining us, welcome to Green Drinks. My name is Katie Breckheimer, and I'm our host for the evening. Joining me is Cassidy Dunaway, our new AmeriCorps staffer, and I just want to give a shout out to all of the new incoming AmeriCorps folks. Project Conserve is a great asset to our environmental community in Western North Carolina. So Cassidy's going to just give us a brief overview of how it's going to work tonight. Just if you're new to Zoom, as many of us are, some of us have been doing it for 6 months now, but it's always a mixed bag. So Cassidy, what can you tell us?
Well, first I can say hi. Hello, everybody. Great to see you. Well, not really see you, but know that you're there. As far as Zoom goes, you all come in. We can't see you or hear you, but you can access the chat, which is located at the bottom of your screen. If you scroll your mouse down or your finger, depending on if you're on your phone, you can hit the chat button, and from there, you can type in a message. It'll come to me, and then as soon as I see the correct timing for it, I will give that to Hume and hopefully be able to get some answers for you. But yeah, so really happy to see you. And if you can't hear us for any reason, make sure that your volume's up, and happy to have you.
Great. Thanks, Cassidy. So the plan for the evening is for me to talk a little bit about who we are and what's coming up next, and then I'll introduce Hume, and he's going to talk to us about SouthWings. And if we encourage you to write in your questions as you think about them, and we'll get to them as we can. And Cassidy will help us navigate that. Also joining us, we have Meredith, who is the new executive director at SouthWings, and she's going to be assisting us through our presentation. And I think Hume's going to introduce her a little bit more. So Green Drinks is sponsored by Mountain True and Conserving Carolina. I'm really missing this social aspect of Green Drinks, where we would get together and network and just share some social time. But as it is, we're going to probably be going virtual for the rest of 2020. And then when we feel comfortable, we'll be going back to Southern Appalachian coffee. But we'll keep you posted when we're feeling like it's safe. So as many of you know, Green Drinks is part of an international movement where people all over the world get together and talk about environmental things. And we're real pleased to have one of the 500 worldwide chapters right here in Hendersonville. What's coming up next? We have some good speakers coming up. On October 8th, Danny Bernstein will be introducing her new book about DuPont State Recreational Forest. And it was great timing. Danny sent me a copy of her book, and it just arrived in the mail today. I couldn't put it down. It's a real interesting read. She starts before there was a plant there that manufactured film, and she goes to some real interesting interviews along the way. So looking forward to Danny's talk. The title of her talk is the same as her book, DuPont Forest, A History. On November 12th, we're hosting the French Broad Riverkeeper, Hartwell Carson, who's gonna talk to us about the state of the French Broad. Mountain True does a lot of water quality work, and we keep these great resources clean and safe for all of us. We're part of the Waterkeeper Alliance, and we house 4 river keepers who are doing all things river related. They cover the French Broad, the Green, the Watauga, as well as the French Broad. Oh, did I say French Broad twice? So it's the Broad River and the French Broad. On December 10th, Christine Whitmire, who is Henderson County's Environmental Program Manager, will talk to us about local recycling. Her title is What Can and Can't Be Recycled and Why. We're going to talk a little bit about the future of composting in Henderson County, which should be interesting. And if you have recycling questions, that will be the time to zoom in. So that'll get us through the end of 2020 with green drinks. But without further ado, I want to introduce Hume Davenport. Hume is a pilot and co-founder of SouthWings, originally from Chattanooga, Tennessee. Hume graduated from the University of Richmond and later earned his master's in environmental studies at Antioch University in New England. As a professional aviator, his experience ranges from training Air Force cadets to flying recreationists, and fire suppression flights in the backcountry of southern Utah. While based in the West, Hume began flying environmentally oriented flights, which ultimately led to the founding of SouthWings. So Hume, it's all yours.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Katie. And thank you, Cassidy, for engineering this get together. And to Green Drinks, I live near the Appalachian Coffee Joint and look forward to resuming in person there. This is not my primary format. I don't think it's really anyone's, but I think we'll have a good time. And I do want to just make a quick announcement about Meredith Dowling, who has joined the panel here on the call. She is not yet the executive director of SouthWings, although she is our associate executive director and will be taking on the role of the executive director on January 1, 2021. So she has graciously joined us to be present here. And we have been spending much of this year in a transitory process of my handing off the executive role to Meredith. And so it's great that she's here also. So thank you one and all. And just a quick note, my general presentation style is very informal. In fact, it's usually conversational. This is going to be a little different for me. But hopefully this will be interactive as much as it can be. And so just to reiterate, Katie and Cassidy, if something comes up in the moment and it seems like a relevant moment to ask that question, tap it on in and Cassidy will get it in front of me and we can explore and talk about things that are relevant to that moment. If it's something that can wait, I'll just mention I got the question, and at the end of the session we can talk about that. There's plenty of time built in at the end to address everyone's questions. So again, thank you very much. I'm pleased to be here. SouthWings is part of a much larger aviation industry niche. And when you think of aviation, you think of all of the, commercial and airlines and charter and flying different, FedEx and flying parcels and that kind of thing. But what we do actually has its own little industry sector, and it's called public benefit flying. And public benefit flying has been around for many years. When most people think about what public benefit flying means, you might think of an air medical group, or now there are organizations that fly. In fact, one here based in Hendersonville is the Honor Air, which if you're here in Western North Carolina, and particularly in Henderson County, you may be familiar that Honor Air transports veterans at no cost to Washington to see monuments, enjoy celebrations and things that they might not normally get to do. And it's got a very strong presence here. So there's lots of ways that pilots can volunteer their aircraft, and they can volunteer their time and their expertise to help some humanitarian effort. Just down the road in Landrum, there's an organization called Pilots and Paws, PAWS. And there is need to transport animals, dogs, cats mainly, from the high kill shelters in the Southeast to families that want pets in the North and Northeast and Midwest. And there are volunteer pilots who will load their planes up with dogs and cats and fly them to make that happen. So this whole notion of flying to do some good out in the world is really a well-rounded and well-respected and well-traveled industry niche. So when I think of where SouthWings fits within that, obviously our tagline, conservation through aviation, gives away a lot. There was a fella out west years ago. He's kind of bush pilot-y, renegade kind of fella, and he realized, and he was an environmentalist. He was a real advocate, and he realized that he saw things from his cockpit that if only other people could see these things, then it would matter to them, and people could learn, and people could get that visceral feeling of understanding these issues from seeing things in sum total from above. And when this pilot, whose name is Michael Stewart, decided that he would formalize and actually engage media and decision makers and others who could join him in his small aircraft and learn about issues throughout he lived in the Southwestern United States. He decided to found an organization, and being a thoughtful guy, he thought, what will I call this thing? And he considered his airplane sort of a bird, a spirit bird. It was his hawk. And he thought, this hawk sheds light on the things that we see below, and things that are wrong and things that can be addressed, and to put solutions into place. So he called his organization Lighthawk. And many years ago, I lived out west and became aware of this organization, Project Lighthawk, and this fellow, Michael Stewart. And it was through that association that I really became enamored with the whole concept of the marriage of environmental and conservation work and aviation. And so I met Michael Stewart, and we chatted and we talked, and not long after that I became, at that time I wasn't even a pilot. I became a pilot and began flying missions to support Michael and the work that his project Lighthawk was doing. And that was really the germination of SouthWings in its current form. The things that SouthWings is known for, all are lessons that were learned in those early years. And I'm proud to say that Michael Stewart is still out there flying and doing what he does, and his organization, which he's no longer with, but was founded 40 years ago, Lighthawk, still exists, and it is truly our sister organization. SouthWings and Lighthawk work hand in hand. We communicate often. We cover the Southeast, and they are mostly Western and Northeastern oriented. So it's all of that still exists, and between that alliance, that informal alliance, but very strong alliance between SouthWings and Lighthawk, therein is the core of conservation and aviation in the Southeast, or across the entire United States. And so, Meredith, if you wouldn't mind switching gears. Thank you. So, conservation aviation, it's a term that we use internally. It's not familiar to everyone, and so again, what we want to do is give people, and by people, sometimes very targeted people, an opportunity to have an experience where they can learn and really understand the landscape below, the river system below, the estuary below. This particular photograph is from the Mississippi River Delta, I believe, down in Louisiana. And we have a very strong program and project that we are working down there. We'll talk about a little bit more about that. But getting the right people in the plane is sometimes why we're working with our partners, and what we're aiming to achieve is to get that person who can make a difference into the aircraft so that they can see and they can learn. Meredith? If there are any river keepers on the call right now, you may recognize one of your sisters here. This is Chandra Pitt Brown, who was in Georgia as a waterkeeper. She's now a consultant, but a longtime waterkeeper. And she's just very emblematic of getting into the aircraft and really being able to detect those details, that minutia, those things in sum total that you just cannot see or understand from a ground base. And I just love this picture. So I'm glad it's part of this presentation. Meredith? So our partners, we're nothing without partners and pilots. Our partners are everything. We have worked with one-person environmental organizations up to the big, major powerhouses of the conservation environmental world, including the World Wildlife Fund and major funders and major organizations. And here regionally, of course, we are very much in tune with the Waterkeeper Alliance, because the Waterkeeper Alliance really grew up in the Southeast alongside as SouthWings was growing also. SouthWings was founded in the mid-1990s, which is about when the Waterkeeper movement began to really take root and grow in the Southeast. It's a very intuitive collaboration. So we think of the Waterkeepers as very emblematic partners for us. They certainly are. They are among the many hundreds of partnerships that we've established across the region. And at this point, we are working in 14 states across the Southeastern region, and just a scotch beyond. Yeah, you're right, Meredith, go ahead. So I mentioned pilots. We're nothing without pilots. These folks are all volunteers. We have about 50 who are active right now. Again, they are scattered across 14 different states. They actually follow a fairly routine demographic, which follows the demographic of general aviation. So these are folks who are hobbyists. They're not necessarily professional pilots, but people who have flown for some number of years. Many of them, like this gentleman, Lance, he's earned some gray hair there, and that's pretty typical of our pilots. They're semi-retired, they're retired. Many of them come from professional backgrounds, doctors, attorneys, and that type of thing. They've been accomplished in their lives, and they are finding ways to give back, and they are attracted to this model of being able to do things they love, fly airplanes, and to help their local and regional environmental organizations achieve their goals as well. And so a lot of times a pilot will become really friendly with a particular partner organization and some clutch of staff within those partner organizations. And they will, and in that way, the pilot becomes very invested in the campaigns of our environmental partners, in the goals of the conservationists that we work with. And that's when we really see a high return on this relationship, because it's very powerful when the pilot really literally becomes one of the team. And so we admire these people, and we herald these people, these pilots, because along with the time and the expertise, they shoulder the cost of the flights. And that's something that they sign up for, and it is not within the regulations of the Federal Aviation Administration for either SouthWings or our partner organizations to reimburse pilots for any fuel or any of the associated costs. And so this is a tall order, because flying small airplanes is, not an inexpensive proposition. And so these are folks who, in our estimation, are heroic. Meredith? So where we are, you see the typical southeastern map there. Where you see the hash marks is kind of where we split boundaries. And again, we split with our sister organization, Lighthawk. Lighthawk had when SouthWings formed in 1996, Lighthawk had a pre-existing relationship with some folks in Southern Florida, primarily around the Everglades. And so to honor that, we decided to just sector that off and allow them the legacy to operate down there south of Florida, or in South Florida. And then up on the northern tier, you see that Pennsylvania is shaded. A few years ago, we decided that we would like to work just in a greater engagement in the Chesapeake Bay, not only the bay proper, but the southern portion, at least, of the Chesapeake watershed, which is a large chunk of that part of the United States. And we decided there's only so far into Pennsylvania we really wanted to go, and we kind of negotiated that little piece of Pennsylvania with our friends at Lighthawk. And just to make clear, there are times when we will discuss with Lighthawk a flight along those boundary lines, and it's very typical that through our discussion, one organization or the other will handle those flights, and we just use common sense. Who's best positioned, who has the resources and the easiest access. So that is another example of our really great relationship with Lighthawk. You all may recognize this if you're tuning in locally. That is, of course, Looking Glass Rock. And that is a very typical aircraft that our volunteer pilots will own. That is a standard Cessna airplane. And they built this same kind of model, starting in the late 40s after World War II, up into the 90s. And there are tens of thousands of these things out there in the world. And this is a Cessna 182. It carries the pilot plus 3. It can carry, a pretty heavy load of weight. And so This is a very, very standard aircraft that we use and that our volunteer pilots come to us with, because it's just a typical airplane that you would see flown in the general aviation universe today. You can also see it has what we call high wing, and the wings are braced by struts. But that high wing offers excellent visibility to the ground and to objects below. And so when we host photographers, well, anybody really, this is really a great option, is to have that high wing aircraft so that folks can really see the detail below. Meredith? So we actually do several different things, but we kind of whittle it down to these three categories because it's just easier to describe to people. And so on the more utilitarian side, we have monitoring and survey flights. So monitoring and survey is, for example, Hartwell Carson may need to have some kind of aerial review of the French Broad, either some portion or in some total, just to check on things and see if there are any issues that he needs to be aware of. And so we will fly someone like Hartwell or one of the waterkeepers, or really anyone who's concerned about their local water, and take folks out to detect any problems, and also to go and, if need be, to maybe file some kind of complaint with the state, and then we have follow-up flights where our pilots and partners will go out and look to see if whatever was amiss has been rectified. So that's the essence of these monitoring and survey flights. A lot of times they lead to higher value flights that we do. Meredith, if you'll click. So, and by higher value, certainly gathering data and information is very important. But there are times when we are looking at things, seeing things that we feel it's just absolutely imperative that others see and understand. That's when we work with our partners to invite people of note. In the last couple of years, we've had a couple of sitting United States senators come on flights with us. We've had local officials, mayors, county council people, and that type of thing. And sometimes it's in the business realm, corporate leaders who are trying to understand what it means if they are funding some kind of activity out in the world. A bank that is investing in companies that are mining inappropriately or something like that. And so we refer to these flights as flights of persuasion. And this is where we really start to get into some real teamwork with our partners, where we sit down at a drawing table and we really talk about who do we want to fly, who should ask that person to join the flight, who will be in the aircraft to describe the scene below, who will be in the aircraft to describe the policy remedy, for example. So it's actually pretty well orchestrated. We even we will talk about what plane and what pilot would be the best fit for this type of venture. So this is a really well conceived and orchestrated type of thing. We're not just piling in and flying, but this could take months to put some of these things together and to pull them off and to really get the bang that we're hoping for. Thanks. And so a big part of what we do is with media, and all sorts of media these days, because so many people now are online. And when we kind of started working with media, we would go to your typical print reporter, back in the day. Let's call reporters from the Chattanooga Times, the Asheville Citizens, and then we started working up the ladder to the New York Times and the Washington Post and to other larger print journal operations. And then the things, as they do, as we learned how to work with media the best in conjunction with our partners, we started hosting even bigger and those types of televised media that are now day in, day out cable news. I think we started with CNN many years ago, and once other media outlets understand that, hey, there's a tool that others are using to better understand this issue or this movement, then they get it all come into line and want to come and fly too. And so we've had a lot of great success flying with media and helping push stories out in front of the world. This is not limited just to the United States. We have hosted media from most of Western Europe, some of Eastern Europe, and even the Middle East. So this is a very powerful use of this tool of the flight. And again, these flights are constructed with the same thought pattern that goes into a flight of persuasion. We want to have the people who can tell the story sitting right next to the journalist in the aircraft, and that's when we get the real return.
So actually,
so,
I'm so sorry. I was going to ask, I have a question. Do you have a moment?
Okay.
So the question says, did SouthWings get involved with the Duke Power Coal ash spill in NC? And then it says photos.
Yeah, that is an excellent question. Coal ash in sum total, and remember, although we're talking in Henderson County, North Carolina, and in North Carolina, we work across 14 states. Coal ash is one of our major issues that we've been working on across the entire, we received a flight request today from one of our stronger partners who is trying to get some updated information about coal ash spills across the state of Alabama. And so we have worked, in fact, this slide that Meredith has brought up, all of these are probably North Carolina, which would probably make them Duke Energy. I'm going to have to admit that I do not know the exact locations of these, but these are all what they're characterizing is the location of coal ash on site and how coal ash is the thin veil between one of these big coal ash impoundments and a river system, which equates to our drinking water, our recreation water, and all the biota that's associated with that river system. And so what you see is that these big coal ash impoundments are perched on riverbanks, and there in the past have been very little to hold back seepage, and in some cases outright bursting of coal ash impoundments into these public waterways. As an example, thank you, Meredith. If you know the coal ash issue, then you may remember 2008. We had a volunteer pilot who took this photograph on Christmas Day. This horrendous eruption of coal ash in 2008 occurred late at night on December 23rd, and the 24th it was becoming quite newsworthy and people were understanding the magnitude of this. And we had a volunteer pilot who actually came down from Bristol, Virginia on Christmas Day to help with professional photographers on board. And I think this is one of the photographs that went viral worldwide, because it was unheard of at that time, at least in the Southeast and probably in the United States, to just have almost the entirety of a coal ash pond just erupt out into the world. And it to this day is still a big deal. And not only in terms of the horrific nature and what's left over from just the injury that this caused on the Emory River in Tennessee, but the workers who helped clean this up. It was noted in a news article just last week that the workers who cleaned this up have suffered mightily from their exposure to the toxic elements that are just filled in these ponds, or I hesitate to call them ponds, impoundments. And so in sum, coal ash is something that we are extremely focused on. And I appreciate the question. And if you have any other questions about that, we can talk about it maybe towards the end or after we get through the slideshow. Meredith, did we skip over anything? Do we need to go back at all? Yeah, and so what we wanted to do here was just kind of show folks where we've been in our history. And SouthWings really began in East Tennessee. We were looking at the conversion and clear cutting of native hardwood and mixed wood forests, and the conversion to pine plantations in the uplands, the Cumberland Plateau in Tennessee. And so while we had this vision of working across the Southeast, we had to start somewhere, and being from East Tennessee, that seemed like a good place to start. So one day someone called me and said, have you heard about mountaintop removal? Mine was probably in 1997 or 98. And I wasn't surprised to hear about strip mining in West Virginia, but this person explained to me that this was something that was beyond just basic strip mining. And it was at that time that we did some preliminary flying up in West Virginia and Eastern Kentucky and Southwestern Virginia, and realized that basically they were blowing the mountain ranges to smithereens to extract coal. And this was not on anyone's radar screen. This was not being really well understood, especially by the people living below these big, massive mine sites. They were suffering the explosions. They were suffering from downpours of floodwaters. Once you strip all the timber and land away, there's very, very little, if anything, to hold back rainwater. And so people below were suffering, and they understood it. And that's who we worked with to begin with. We're just local people. They didn't really even have an organization. But it was actually through our association with Appalachian Voices, which is a North Carolina-based organization. We began to just start flying community leaders up there, and that meant clergy, school teachers, business leaders, people who saw that there was and faith leaders, and realized that there's something way amiss, and just a heightened moment of extraction and strip mining that was going on and couldn't be explained. We started flying, and I mean, there were people who wept in the airplane. I remember I had some community members, and we were flying, and they were stunned when they saw what was going on above their homes. And I remember one woman said, "What will our grandchildren think of us for having done this?" And everyone in the plane was weeping. They were so upset. And I had a journalist from a national newspaper. he was weeping. He was, and it ain't easy to make a newspaper man weep. So it was really our first big experience in breaking into what was to become a national and international issue that had so many layers of to pick through in terms of it's the entire cycle of coal is what we eventually kind of came to, is the extraction, the movement of the coal, the burning of the coal ash, the disposal of the coal ash, the resultant emission, the resultant warming of the atmosphere, the resultant increase of sea level and everything else that we see as a result of climate change due to fossil fuel. And so we thought, given how big and complex this is, the best thing we can do is get everybody out there that we can get to understand it. And that's when we really started flying a lot of media. And that's when the media came from around the world. And we were at first surprised that people in Europe were as concerned as people in West Virginia who live near these sites about what was going on, not only because of the injury to the landscape, which, you know, despite promises is irreparable except on a millennium scale. It's absolutely irreparable. And people were just aghast to see this. And it was really, it was SouthWings lifting folks up over these sites, which are massive. That's not acres you're looking at, that's square miles in this photograph. And people reacted, and media came, and business leaders came, and people who were political people came to understand this. And for many years, this was primarily what we did, was flying in and around West Virginia and parts of Kentucky and Virginia, looking at this very issue. Meredith? Well, we couldn't roll through our greatest hits without talking about the time they blew up the Gulf of Mexico. So you all probably recall that in, I think it was in 2011, 2010, with the Deepwater Horizon, which some people call the BP disaster, when so many millions of gallons of oil were just dispersed in a very short period of time into the Gulf of Mexico, and literally polluted a major portion of the Gulf of Mexico. And I think everyone can probably remember back to some media that they saw or some attention that they saw to this. And again, this was one of those things. This site was about 100 miles offshore, and which is a long boat ride. And so we were tapped. We were not flying a great deal in the Gulf of Mexico at that time. And then suddenly we had to pool a lot of resources down to the Gulf Coast, primarily New Orleans and Mobile, to be able to launch flights, and again, media primarily, to get out and to see the extent and the scope of this disaster and what it had caused. And again, the ultimate goal was, you know, circling back to the big picture, fossil fuel extraction and offshore drilling, and the dangers and hazards, not only to human health. I think there were several people killed in that explosion, but also to marine life, and then beyond the extraction, the movement, and then again the use, and then we're back to global warming again. And so we decided, once again, that the best thing that we could do was to get this information in front of as many people as we possibly could. And again, and you can see the photo credit is with a gentleman, John Wathen, the Hurricane Creek Keeper, another of the, the Waterkeeper Alliance, and a very long time friend of SouthWings, and someone who got some images that were just startling. They were stunning. They were horrific. If you remember seeing a whale just being washed over with oil in the ocean or in the Gulf, that was one of his photos, and it really again just provoked this necessary discussion, and we were both thankful and to be there, to be able to play that role, and at the same time we were just horrified. I think everyone had to, as a staff, we had to take a couple of days off every now and then just to get through this thing. It was such an injury that it felt personal to us as well. So Meredith, I think we've so here's the upside. We do not want people to get on an airplane and see doom and gloom and not see or have some discussion about what is the solution. And that is a big purpose of ours, is to get past what's wrong and get into the discovery of how do we fix this? What is the brighter day? Where is the hope? We want every flight to end with our flight participants to be able to get off of the plane and have some sense, personally or professionally, of an action that they can take to try to make it a little bit better world. And this photograph, which is an aerial photograph, if you're familiar with Buffalo Mountain over in East Tennessee, it was TVA's first wind farm in East Tennessee. And well, we caught it one day, it just, like this above the clouds, and it just seemed almost miraculous seeing these wind turbines up there spinning away and in such a beautiful setting. And this is a photograph that I actually look at a lot. It's powerful, and to me it just speaks of hope. And as renewables are becoming more of an option, and as renewables are starting to supplant the old fossil fuels, and we move into a new day, it is my hope that the work that we have done over these last 25 years has in some way inspired some of that movement, and that we all collectively keep our eye on a new day. This, I don't know, I say this a lot, but this too shall pass, and here's our future, and I'm convinced of that, and that's one of the things that keeps SouthWings running. Meredith, is that it? Whoop. So sometimes our work is a little more routine and a little more stoic. We help folks. A lot of folks engage in litigation to correct the ills that they see out there and that they detect, and a lot of times aerial photographs help make the case. And here are just a few examples of that. I don't want to get too far off. I see we're at like almost 7 o'clock. One last thing that has recently occurred last year. Hi, that's Skippy. And this is something that we worked on for years and years and years, was helping to promote the passage of the Tennessee Wilderness Act. And this again speaks to just hope and good things that using this tool can accomplish. And I mean, we flew legislative staff, we flew any number of local lawmakers and local business leaders and environmentalists and conservationists and folks from every walk of life to promote this wilderness over in the Cherokee, to protect this 20,000 acres. And after many years of working in concert with a team of partners, we were so happy to see this pass. And it's just a testament to the element of teamwork. It's a testament to using the tool, and our tool is only one, obviously, but just being part of that campaign was deeply satisfying also. And great example of just something positive in the environment and conservation world that's occurred here in the Southeast in the last few years. And one issue that we address also here in North Carolina that's fairly significant is our work with different organizations to try to stem this use of biomass for electricity generation. It's generally the clear cutting of landscapes to manufacture pellets, which then go in mass or exported to some European nations that then use our forests as an energy source. And unbeknownst to them, we are unsustainably clear cutting our forests to help them do their thing. So, and we do a lot of work down on the Gulf of Mexico. That's what Meredith did. Meredith, I'm just going to say, let's just kind of cruise on through these and.
Yeah, I'm thinking we're winding down here, and Cassidy, is there one question in the Q&A?
Yes, yeah, there was one. I was just waiting until we were ready.
You want to take that now?
Yeah, so the question reads, what are your most successful campaigns?
That is such a good question. I try to touch on that here. I'd have to go back to working with the Dogwood Alliance years ago to help stem clear cutting, not just in East Tennessee, but across the Southeast for pulp and paper production. I think the mountaintop removal work that we've done is significant. Again, these big ticket items that are sort of, major things like the Gulf of Mexico, exposing why we need to impose a moratorium on offshore drilling using the Deepwater Horizon as the example of that. But I've got to tell you, and of course that Tennessee Wilderness Act. But I have to say, these things happen over years, decades. None of this happens simply, easily, or quickly. And it's sometimes generations to really have any accomplishments at all. And so we see things as just an ongoing campaign to keep pushing for the very best of what we can do. And I think this statement really it's the best encapsulation of how we want to deploy this tool of flight. And I think that's, hopefully that's answer enough. That's the hardest question anybody asks is what's the best thing you ever did?
I have a question.
We don't know yet. We don't know what the best thing we ever did yet is.
I had a question, Hume.
Yeah.
So when you guys are up in the air, and you've been up flying for quite a while, have you noticed the visibility decreasing as we have more pollutants in the atmosphere?
Well, actually, that was one of the things that we used to really highlight when we flew, particularly here in Western North Carolina in the summertime. whatever the flight was supposed to be looking at, we always mentioned. And the reason you can't see more than 3 or 4 miles is because of the air pollutants that are sent airborne from the Rust Belt, from these 2-mile-high stacks that are 2,000-foot tall stacks. And, you know, frankly, I think the air quality has gotten a little better
That's good.
over time.
Good.
I do not. It seems to me like it is. You know, there were some legislative remedies that were put into place, and I think that those are effective. I think that they are working.
Good. Good to hear. All right. Well, any other questions, Cassidy? Are you seeing anything?
Not a question. No, pardon me. I just half read it. Not a question, but it says, "Thank you for your presentations. I have learned a lot about the vital work of SouthWings." So, appreciation.
Yeah. Good.
Well, thanks to everyone for coming. Thanks again to Green Drinks, and of course, Katie and Cassidy and Susan, who may be with us somewhere. I don't know.
Susan
And
B.
of course, to Meredith.
Yes, and Mountain True and Conserving Carolina and all our new AmeriCorps people.
Yay.
So
Good on
again,
you
thank
all.
you. Thank you. And great to meet you, Meredith, and good luck with the new job. And
Thank
we
you so
hope to
much.
see everybody back here again next month for Danny Bernstein to talk about DuPont State Forest and her new book. So good night, everyone. Thanks for joining us.